Every year, presidents gather around to pardon a turkey. But this year, Joe Biden added a little twist to the tradition. Along with saving one lucky bird from becoming dinner, he also issued a pardon that has everyone talking. And no, it's not for stuffing, theft, or cranberry sauce crimes. Just days after Thanksgiving 2024, President Biden pardoned his son Hunter, who had been convicted earlier this year on charges of tax evasion and lying on a federal gun application. The move has sparked a political firestorm, with critics calling it favoritism and supporters claiming it's an act of compassion. Either way, it's got people asking, when should a president use this power and how far is too far? But Biden isn't the first president to spark outrage. From Watergate to Iran-Contra to billionaire fugitives, this list proves that the presidential pardon is one of the most powerful and controversial tools in American politics. So let's break down the 10 most controversial pardons in US history. Trust me, this list has more twists than a Thanksgiving turkey leg, and not all of them are as easy to digest. Gerald Ford's pardon of Richard Nixon in 1974. The Watergate scandal consumed America in the early 1970s, exposing corruption at the highest levels of government. It ended with President Richard Nixon resigning in disgrace, the first and only US president to do so. Watergate began with a break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters in 1972. It evolved into a far-reaching scandal when investigators uncovered Nixon's efforts to cover up the crime, abuse his power, and obstruct justice. His resignation on August 9, 1974 was seen as the culmination of a political and constitutional crisis. On September 8, 1974, just 1 month after taking office, President Gerald Ford announced that Nixon would receive a full, free, and absolute pardon for any crimes he may have committed as president. Ford argued that prosecuting Nixon would drag the country through a prolonged ordeal and prevent national healing. The public backlash was immediate and severe. Many viewed the pardon as evidence of a corrupt bargain between Ford and Nixon, although Ford denied this. Historians still debate whether the pardon was an act of political courage or a miscarriage of justice. Jimmy Carter's amnesty for Vietnam draft dodgers in 1977. The Vietnam War tore the nation apart, not only on the battlefield but at home. While over 58,000 US soldiers died in the war, more than 100,000 young men resisted the draft, either fleeing the country or going into hiding. On January 21, 1977, his first full day in office, President Jimmy Carter issued a proclamation granting unconditional amnesty to those who had violated the Selective Service Act. The decision wiped their records clean, allowing them to return to the US without fear of legal repercussions. Veterans, many of whom risked their lives in Vietnam, were outraged. Organizations like the American Legion called the move a betrayal, arguing it rewarded lawbreakers while ignoring those who had served honorably. On the other hand, anti-war activists and draft resistors saw the amnesty as a necessary step toward reconciliation after a divisive war. Carter's decision remains polarizing. Some historians praise his boldness in addressing one of the most contentious issues of the Vietnam era, while others argue it deepened divisions among Americans. Bill Clinton's pardon of Mark Ridge in 2001. As Bill Clinton prepared to leave the White House, he issued a flurry of pardons on his final day in office, one of which became synonymous with controversy. Ridge was a commodities trader who became a fugitive after being indicted in 1983 for tax evasion, fraud, and illegal oil dealings with Iran during the hostage crisis. Living in Switzerland, he avoided prosecution for nearly 2 decades. Ridge's ex-wife, Denise Ridge, donated over $1 million to democratic causes, including the Clinton Library. Critics accused Clinton of granting the pardon in exchange for financial contributions. Clinton claimed he was persuaded by Ridge's legal team, which argued that the charges were unjust and politically motivated. International leaders also vouched for Ridge's contributions to humanitarian causes. Congressional hearings followed with bipartisan criticism of the pardon. It became a defining blemish on Clinton's presidency and a textbook example of perceived cronyism. Andrew Johnson's amnesty for Confederate leaders in 1868. After the Civil War, the question of how to reintegrate the South into the Union loomed large. President Andrew Johnson believed that offering forgiveness was key to the reunification. In May 1865, Johnson offered a blanket pardon to most Southerners but high-ranking Confederate officials and wealthy landowners had to apply individually. By December 1868, Johnson extended a sweeping amnesty to all Confederates, including Jefferson Davis. Radical Republicans in Congress, who were pushing for strict Reconstruction policies, felt betrayed. They argued that Johnson's leniency undermined efforts to hold Confederates accountable for slavery and the war. Johnson's pardons are seen as emblematic of his broader failures during Reconstruction, including his inability to address the rights of newly freed African Americans. Warren G. Harding's pardon of Eugene V. Debs in 1921. Eugene V. Debs, a 5-time presidential candidate and prominent socialist, became a symbol of the struggle between free speech and government authority during World War I. In 1918, Debs was sentenced to 10 years in prison for a speech criticizing the war effort under the Espionage Act. Despite his imprisonment, he garnered nearly 1 million votes in the 1920 presidential election. President Warren G. Harding, a conservative Republican, surprised many by pardoning Debs on Christmas Day 1921. Harding invited Debs to the White House to demonstrate goodwill despite their ideological differences. Conservatives criticized Harding for being too lenient, while socialists and free speech advocates celebrated the pardon as a victory. George A.W. Bush's Iran-Contra pardons in 1992. The Iran-Contra scandal exposed illegal activities at the highest levels of the Reagan administration. President George H.W. Bush's pardon effectively ended the investigation. Reagan administration officials secretly sold arms to Iran and used the proceeds to fund Contra rebels in Nicaragua, violating US law. Caspar Weinberger, the former Secretary of Defense, was set to stand trial for his role in the affair. On Christmas Eve 1992, Bush pardoned Weinberger and 5 others, cutting off further investigations. Independent counsel Lawrence Walsh accused Bush of a cover-up, suggesting the pardons were self-serving. Critics saw the pardons as undermining accountability, while Bush defended them as necessary to end a politically charged case. Donald Trump's pardon of Joe Arpaio in 2017. Joe Arpaio, the self-proclaimed toughest sheriff in America, became a polarizing figure for his harsh treatment of inmates and controversial immigration policies. Arpaio was found guilty of criminal contempt for ignoring a court order to stop racial profiling. Before he could be sentenced, Trump pardoned him. Critics argued the pardon sent a dangerous signal that public officials could defy court orders without consequence. Supporters praised Arpaio as a patriot targeted for his enforcement of immigration laws. Barack Obama's commutation of Chelsea Manning's sentence in 2017. Chelsea Manning's leaks of classified documents to WikiLeaks made her a hero to some and a traitor to others. Manning exposed US military secrets, including civilian casualties in war zones. After serving 7 years of a 35-year sentence, Manning's sentence was commuted. Obama argued the punishment was excessive but condemned the leaks. Well, the decision divided the nation, with advocates for transparency praising it and national security experts criticizing. Donald Trump's pardons of Manafort, Stone, and Kushner in 2020. Paul Manafort was convicted of financial crimes related to lobbying for Ukraine. Roger Stone, convicted of lying to Congress during the Russia investigation, and Charles Kushner, convicted of tax evasion and witness retaliation. The Manafort, Stone, and Kushner pardons were emblematic of Trump's broader approach to clemency. Legal experts criticized them as tools to protect allies and undermine the justice system. Supporters claimed Trump was correcting political prosecutions. And finally, Donald Trump's pardon of Scooter Libby in 2018. In April 2018, Donald Trump reignited a 15-year-old political controversy by pardoning I. Louis Scooter Libby, the former chief of staff of Vice President Dick Cheney. Libby's conviction stemmed from the Valerie Plame CIA leak scandal. In 2003, Plame's identity as a covert CIA operative was revealed in the media after her husband, Joseph Wilson, publicly criticized the Bush administration's justification for the Iraq War. The leak prompted a federal investigation. And although Libby wasn't accused of leaking Plame's identity directly, he was found guilty in 2007 of perjury, obstruction of justice, and making false statements to investigators. He was sentenced to 30 months in prison and fined $250,000. In 2007, President George W. Bush commuted Libby's sentence, sparing him from prison time, but leaving his conviction intact. This partial clemency was highly controversial, with Bush facing backlash for interfering in a politically charged case. By fully pardoning Libby, Trump erased his conviction entirely. In his statement, Trump said, I don't know Mr. Libby, but for years I have heard he has been treated unfairly. Trump's decision raised questions about why he chose to revisit a long-settled case. Critics argued that the pardon was less about Libby's specific case and more about Trump signaling his willingness to protect political allies under investigation. At the time, the Mueller probe into Russian election interference was in full swing, and many saw the Libby pardon as a message to Trump's associates that loyalty might be rewarded. Conservative figures and allies of Cheney praised the pardon, arguing that Libby had been scapegoated in a politically motivated investigation. Cheney himself issued a rare public statement thanking Trump for righting a grievous wrong. Presidential pardons, symbols of justice or tools of politics? They've shaped history and sparked outrage. Which pardon shocked you the most? Well, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Check out some of our other videos.